Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast. And today we will be riding the bench for a lot of sports. We'll talk some World Series wrap up, get into a little bit of hockey, and then we'll probably get into both college and pro football, and maybe talk a little soccer even down the end there. Of course, as always, my name is Labi, Koussoulis, and I am joined by Jacob Bussey. Jacob, how are you doing today, man?
It's good. Sorry about the long delay, folks. It's school's been really busy, but I'm glad to finally find some time in my day to get back on this podcast. I've really missed it, to be honest.
Yeah, and we'll be working on getting a regular uploading schedule back to you and try to get these things out weekly again. I
We're
know it has
working
been a
on it,
while.
folks. We're working on it.
Yeah, we'll be there. And so I think let's get right into it and let's just do a World Series recap. Of course, congratulations to the Los Angeles Dodgers for
Yep.
finally figuring it out and winning a World Series. And I think there's a couple of interesting points to talk about. There's of course, the Game 6 decision to pull the starting pitcher of the Tampa Bay Rays.
Yep.
Then there's also Turner celebrating on the
Oh
field
yeah.
even though he had his COVID. But yeah, Jacob, let's just general
Well,
your thoughts on the Dodgers finally getting it done.
obviously, good job to Kershaw. It's been how long has it been in the league, and he's finally won it. Like it's been 12 years or something like that. Um, Congrats to him. He didn't choke. He played fantastic this postseason, the best I've ever seen him play. Um, Let's talk Rays. What Kevin Cash was going through. I don't know what went through his mind when he decided he's going to pull Blake Snell. Now, this brings up the whole conversation of analytics versus using your own damn eyes. And it seemed like Cash relied too heavy on the analytics. He wasn't looking at his pitcher, who was pitching an absolutely outstanding game. 18 batters he faced, and he struck out half of them. It's hard enough to strike out 3 or 4, and he's striking out 9. And then he's coming up against Mookie Betts, who, as a matter of fact, does significantly worse against left-handed pitchers than he does against right-handed pitchers. Now, when he pulled him, didn't even give him a chance to argue, didn't even give him a chance to debate it. Just give me the ball, you're done. And obviously, we know what happened is the Dodgers, Mookie Betts singled, and then they got an RBI off that, ultimately winning the game. When Kevin Cash spoke after the game, he said he didn't want he didn't want Blake Snell, the pitcher of the Rays, seeing Mookie Betts and the top of the order for a third time. Sure, his analytics show he's not great, but if you look with your own eyes, you could see that Blake Snell was wheeling and dealing out there. Like there was no question as to why he should be pulled, but he was pulled, and Snell was very disappointed after the game, and so was the rest of the team. You know, Kevin Kiermaier, been with the Rays forever, I think, was very, very disappointed. I'm still disappointed in the call. Tampa had a really good shot at winning that World Series this year.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it. It's a talk about the significance of analytics and how much do you play into that.
Yeah.
Um, and I that was Kevin Cash's
Hmm.
justification talking about he didn't want to face the top of the lineup for a third time, and typically that's a good call in baseball because the more times you see a pitcher, the
Hmm.
more familiar you are with their stuff, the more likely you are to get a hit. And as much as the top of the lineup was 0 for 6 on the night, that you can justify that that's all the more reason that they were due for a hit. And I understand sort of the justifications that you can make. The thing that I'll say when you talk about analytics and the reason why I don't like the fact that this happened is because all these traditionalists and all these people are going to use this to talk about how bad analytics are and you can't rely everything on analytics. But I think the important thing to mention here is the team that used analytics the most originally was the Oakland Athletics. Of course, we're talking Moneyball and all that.
Right.
And and I mean, even with the Athletics and the actual Moneyball guy
Hmm.
himself said, analytics help us get to the playoffs with a worse team.
Yeah.
With a team with less money, but then once you get to the playoffs, it's such a small sample size that analytics don't make as big of a difference. And so I understand why Kevin Cash did what he did. He's a team that's 28th in payroll and he's in the World Series. He's a game away from going to a Game 7 of the World Series.
Right.
And analytics is what's got him there. But when you look within a playoffs, within a series, within an individual game, you know, the analytics are going to make less of a difference. Analytics make a big difference over an 162, or in this case, a 60-game season, because the little percentage differences here and there that give you that advantage make a big difference when you extrapolate that over 60 games. But I completely agree with you. If you're in Game 6 of the World Series, at some point, you have to throw away the analytics in the moment of a World Series game and go with your gut, go with your eyes, go with the decision that you think is the best as a person, not what the analytics say. And I think that that's where you have the biggest difference. I don't think analytics are useless. I mean, if it wasn't for analytics, the Rays wouldn't be in the World Series. But I absolutely agree with you. In that moment, you need to use your eyes and think about what the best decision in this moment is. Use analytics to help you, but at the end of the day, I think he should have kept them in,
Right.
and I agree with you on that one.
I think the big issue was how important that game was to Tampa. They won the game before in an absolutely crazy ending. They have the momentum carrying it into this game. Snell looks like Cy Young winner. Like his ERA was so low, and Mookie Betts was 0 for 2 against him on the day with a strikeout. So to me, um, pulling him made no sense because obviously the next three batters are the best. The next three are obviously the best batters on the team. But when he's not letting any run, he only had one hit against him in his 6 innings, or his 5 1/3, whatever you want to call. It didn't it when Snell was pulled, you could obviously see the frustration because he was wheeling and dealing, and it seemed like Tampa just gave up after that because it looked like Snell was the heart and soul of that team in that game, and then they pulled him, and there it goes. There's the rest of the game.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that analytics don't talk about, because analytics just look at performance, is stuff like you said, momentum and how people act in response to decisions does make a difference, and that's something that analytics can't consider. And if you listen to the post-game press conferences, all of the Dodgers players were so happy that Snell left the game.
Yeah, they were
Like
very
it,
excited. Yeah.
it sort of lit a fire underneath them. It made them realize, oh, we have a chance to get back in this game, because it was only like a 1 or 2 run game at that point. And so, as much as analytics might tell you, hey, the better baseball move here is to take the pitcher out of the game because there's, for every reason that we've already been through. But from a mental standpoint, when the Tampa Bay players see your ace pitcher leaving the game, that is going to be worrying to them. That might add extra pressure.
It's
What about
deflating.
the pitcher who has to come in after that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then if you're a Dodgers player, you are probably dejected of, oh my goodness, we can't hit this guy. Like, he's on a roll. What are we going to do? All of a sudden, you're Mookie Betts. You're a fantastic player. You're a former MVP, and
Hmm.
you're playing like it in this series. You can't hit a dude, and then all of a sudden they bring in another random guy out of the bullpen. All of a sudden, your eyes light up. Oh, here we go. I'm gonna go get a base hit, and that's exactly what he did. And that's what analytics can't consider. And in a playoff game, stuff like momentum and confidence and all of that matters even more. And so I think that's the other thing that people weren't realizing is the
Hmm.
Dodgers. Their whole mentality changed when that pitching decision happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it did too. And when you're bringing in Liam Anderson, whose ERA is above a 5 this postseason,
Yeah,
and
he was
Mickey,
terrible in the
he
playoffs.
was
Wrong
awful.
pitcher to bring in.
And Mookie Betts, against left-handed pitchers like Snell, it was like a .56 compared to a right-hander where he's a 1.036. He's like double the. It just, to me, it didn't make any sense, and I don't I don't understand it, and I don't think I ever will. I will always be heated for this. As a Blue Jay fan, obviously, I would have loved to see Tampa win, which is weird to say, but they looked really good. Like they beat the cheating Astros. They're unstoppable. They're gonna make it. They shot themselves in the foot, and Kevin Cash never really apologized. He just said it was his decision, and that's it. Kind of unsettling and unclosure for Tampa Bay fans. That's all I want to say about it. I don't want to get too heated again.
Yep. And I mean, that's a Tampa Bay perspective. I mean, from the Dodgers perspective, I
Yeah.
mean, you have the number one payroll in baseball pretty much. So obviously, you should have a God squad. They had a God tier squad, but this was a team that, was routinely choking in the playoffs. I mean, you can make the argument, like a lot of LA fans will, of, oh, we would have beaten the Astros if they weren't cheating. And you know what? Maybe they would have. But, the
Hmm.
Astros proved this year without cheating that they were still a good team. They made it to game 7 of the ALCS without cheating. And as much as they had a terrible regular season, so we still don't know, how really,
Right.
good that Astros team is without the cheating. But the fact of the matter is like the Dodgers needed like 6 or 7 years with a lot of this core in order to finally get the job done. But they remind me a lot, sort of like the Tampa Bay Lightning this
Lightning.
year.
Yeah, I was
You
gonna
know,
say the same thing.
like everybody sort of realized that they had one of the best teams in the league for a couple of years, and they could just never get it done in the playoffs. And this year they finally got it done. So it is worth congratulating the Dodgers. I mean, it only took you 5 tries with the best team in the league, but you got your championship, and I mean, you can't take that away from them. A lot of people are going to say, "Oh, it doesn't count because of the 60 game." Look, they were the best team in the regular season. They were on like an
Yeah,
110 win pace or
it was
something
gonna be
ridiculous like
ridiculous
that.
this year. Yeah.
And I mean, they won the playoffs, and it was a legitimate playoffs. Like they had to win the normal games
Yeah.
in the playoffs.
So
So
good job for them.
yeah, I mean, congratulations to the Dodgers. Turner is a scrub for celebrating with COVID, but we won't get
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, and then there's no disciplinary.
Yeah,
Help me out here.
disciplinary action. Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
that
Yeah, the
I
league
I
is so.
don't I
I
don't
don't get
get
that
that.
either. I don't either. It just sets an example as, oh, if he can get away with it, so can I.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you look at what the different leagues are doing with respect to COVID. I mean, the NBA and the NHL did a fantastic job with the bubble, and there were
Oh yeah,
no
no
positive
tests,
cases.
not one.
And then the NFL, I mean, you can argue that they aren't doing enough, but to be fair to the NFL, and we'll transition into football very quickly,
Hmm.
but they've been suspending coaches and teams a lot of money for not wearing masks properly,
The
for
the Ra-
breaching.
the
Yeah,
Raiders
the
are
rate.
they have $1.2 million in COVID fines already.
And I think they just had to forfeit a draft pick as well. So,
Yeah, six pick.
yeah, so the NFL is. I mean, you can say they're not doing enough, and I would probably agree with you. But
Hmm.
I mean, for the MLB to not even punish him at all is an
No.
absolute joke.
It looks really bad on them because everyone else is getting punished for it, and he's just walks scot free.
Yep, no,
Anyway,
completely agree.
let's talk about football. We're gonna talk Maple Leafs. We'll do that one last because there's quite a bit to talk about in my opinion. Let's talk some football.
Yeah, so let's get into the NFL first and foremost, and we are approaching the halfway part of the season. Of course,
Wow,
this
that's
is.
crazy.
Yeah, we have games going on today, of course, as we're recording this on a Sunday, about an hour before the early games kick off.
Mhm.
And so I think the first thing that we're going to do is sort of go and do what we did a couple of podcasts ago, and that's just go through the divisions and sort of see, which teams are for real, which teams are not. We'll try not to talk too much about how garbage the NFC East is, but we'll start actually with the NFC East, just because it's such a garbage division. But
Okay.
Jacob, who do you have coming out of there?
No one. um, what a garbage division. Honestly, the Philadelphia Eagles lead that division 3-4-1. Like Washington is right behind them in the 2-5-0. Obviously everyone expected the Cowboys to win. Dak goes down. Dalton goes down. Also, that was a questionable hit. No disciplinary action on that one either. And the Giants. They're the Giants. I'm sorry. I know you're a Giants fan, but they're the Giants.
Yeah,
Um,
we suck at this point. I
yeah.
want to tank for draft picks.
Well, unfortunately, the Jets are going to beat you on that. Anyways, the Eagles or the Cow or the Eagles. Honestly, I think will come out of the division. I think it'll be like the first time that a team is like below 500 that'll come out of the division. I don't think they're going to get above 500 this year. They're the Eagles. They're so inconsistent. Washington has a good chance. Washington, you know what Washington is? Washington compared to Dallas, Washington is a team that is playing for their coach, and they don't really care if they do well or not. They're playing for their coach. Obviously, Ron Rivera is had his last dose of chemotherapy. Good for him. I'm glad he's okay. Um, but Dallas is fractured. The second Dak went down in that game, you could see the hurt and the pain in his eyes, not only for the moment, but for what was to come. Um, and unfortunately, Dalton comes in, Dallas boy making his debut. This is gonna be great. Gets injured, gets hit questionably in one of his first games, and they're all blaming McCarthy and his coaching staff, and it's just fractured. And I don't see Dallas winning for the next couple of years. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have much to add. I completely agree with you with the Cowboys. I think that people didn't realize how big of a influence Dak Prescott was on that team. I mean, this was a team that was supposed to have a good defense, and they quite possibly have the worst defense in the NFL. I mean, the Giants were even able to score like 30 points on them, so I think that says something. But yeah, I mean, without Dak, this is a team that just is lacking direction. And the one thing I will say with Dak is obviously, first, I hope he gets back healthy because it was a brutal injury, and hopefully it's not anything that has any long term issues. But I mean, he was looking for $40 million a year on that contract. He's gonna get $40 million a year on that contract because the
Yep.
Cowboys are realizing that they can't win games without him, and so because of that, I can't pick the Cowboys to come out of this division without a quarterback.
Yeah, I
Even
agree.
if it's Dalton, like he saw, even in his one game before he got injured, he showed he wasn't good enough to lead that team.
I agree.
And so, I mean, it's crazy that you think about it, but the Washington football team being the biggest competitor to win the division. And I think because of that, it's the Eagles division. Whether it's 6 wins or 7 wins, they're going to win the division and they're going to lose that first playoff game. I mean, that's really all I can say.
Yeah, they're not gonna get anywhere else in the playoffs.
With respect to that, yeah. But I mean, I think it's shocking. Washington plays the Giants today, so if they win that game and go to 3-5, and the Eagles lose their game this week, then Washington could be at the top of the division. But I do think that that the Eagles will, see out the division and win that one.
I agree. All right, let's move on to the NFC West, which is a surprisingly competitive division. You have the Seahawks 6-1. Today's going to be a good game for the Seahawks and the Bills. I'm hoping the Bills can pull out a win. They haven't been able to beat a team over 500 yet. So we have the Seahawks 6-1, Cardinals at 5-2, the Rams at 5-3, and the 49ers at 4-5. Your thoughts on this division?
Well, I just want to point out that when everyone laughed at me for picking the Seahawks to win the Super Bowl this year, I just want to point out that Russell Wilson is the MVP so far this season, and the Seahawks are 6-1, and they're looking really damn good. And then I think when you look at the rest of this division, you have a Rams team at 5-3, but 4 of those wins are against the NFC East teams. So I still don't know which who the LA Rams are. I don't know if they're a team that can win against the teams they should be winning against, and that's about it, or if they're a legitimate team. And I think that it is unfortunate that they're in such a stacked division because they're going to have to win some big divisional games in order to prove me wrong. But I do have my doubts about the Rams. The Cardinals, now this is a team that, you look at the importance of having a coach and quarterback play together for a while.
Yeah.
It's now the second year with Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, and we see Kyler Murray has shot out of a cannon this year. He's playing very, very good football. He has a legitimate number 1 receiver in DeAndre Hopkins now to throw to. That defense is pretty solid. Like, the Cardinals are a good team, and they're going to keep getting better in the future. The question is, how good are they this year? But I think they have a really bright future ahead of them, and like they're a legitimate wild card team this year. I don't think they have what it takes to knock off the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks will still win the division.
I agree.
But I think the Cardinals and the Rams are still very much in the wild card hunt, and the 49ers, I mean, it's not their fault.
I know.
I swear they have an injury at every single position, and that's not an exaggeration.
No, it's not. Their quarterback's gone, their tight end's gone, their defensive end's gone, their you name it. They're such an injury-prone team.
Yeah, though the one thing I will say though that's just not excuses for injuries is, a lot's been talked about Jimmy Garoppolo, and he was looked at very highly when they made it to the when they got to the Super Bowl, and of course, then a lot of people criticized him, saying, "Oh, I could be Jimmy Garoppolo. All I have to do is hand the ball off 40 times a game." And so, I think it's interesting because I mean, I think Garoppolo's shown his weaknesses this season and shown that maybe he's not an elite quarterback. He's more of a game manager and he's just doing what the 49ers want him to do. So
Right.
it's going to be very interesting because I mean, they're 4-5, so they're still very much their season's still very much alive. But
Yep.
with the injuries that they have, it's going to be very interesting because I don't see a path to the playoffs for them just because of the stacked division that they're in. It's kind of unfortunate that it goes that way, but I think that outside of the injuries, they do have to take a look at Garoppolo at quarterback and sort of, is he the guy, or, what direction is this team going to go in moving forward? I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that and just the division as a whole.
Yeah, Seahawks are winning that. It's going to be a really, really, really good division to watch in the future. If Jimmy Garoppolo is healthy, like that's a tighter race. The 49ers are not 4-5. They're closer to like 5-3, 5-4. Um, Obviously it sucks because you never want to see a team like that. They were Super Bowl. They were almost in the they were in the Super Bowl last year. I believe they were. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
they
were.
were. They were. Yeah, I mean, they go from that to being the basement of their division. It's awful and it sucks and it's obviously not their fault. Um I don't think the Cardinals. I think they'll make the wild card. I don't think they'll go any further. I still think Kyler Murray needs maybe 1 or 2 more years to finally get up to his full potential. He's playing outstanding right now, and yeah, having Hopkins is definitely a huge, huge advantage to him. Thank you, Houston, for being idiots. But I think the Cardinals are definitely at the top of the division in the next 2 years.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that it'll be good to get playoff experience for that team this year, even if they end up losing the first playoff game that they play. I think that the important thing is getting that young core some experience playing in a playoff game. And I agree
Mm,
with you. I think this is a long-term project in Arizona. And I think that as the Seahawks get even older and as Russell Wilson goes into the twilight of his career, they're hoping that Kyler Murray will just take his throne atop that division.
I agree.
So let's move into the NFC North, and this is another interesting division. Obviously, the Packers as the overwhelming favorites at 6-2, but the Chicago Bears are 5-3. But they're such an interesting team because they are a team that went 3-0 with Mitch Trubisky, then benched him for Nick Foles, and have gone 2-3 with Nick Foles. They're 5-3. Their defense is elite like usual, but
Hmm.
it doesn't look like they still don't have an answer for that offense in that quarterback position. Then you have the
Yeah.
Detroit Lions at 3-4, and I mean Matt Stafford is really doing the best he can, but the Lions have also lost a lot of close games, so maybe they're good for that 3-4 record. Maybe it's a bit too generous. Maybe it's a bit too harsh. They're a really tough team to judge. And then the Vikings at 2-5. Once again, I think a lot of people think the Vikings are going to be good, and then every year, it feels like they suck every year. So wherever you want to take this.
Um, I think the Lions are actually looking a lot more consistent than the Bears, um, which is really weird to say. But it looks like Stafford, even though the record is 3-4, they've come back like in games twice. One against Atlanta. Shout out to what's his name that went down, Todd Gurley, for going into the end zone a little prematurely. They came back and won that game. But I think the Lions actually have a better chance of making the playoffs than the Bears. And the only reason I say that is because, like you said, 3-0 with Trubisky, they bench him for some reason, and they put Foles in the 2-3. They're on a 2-game losing skid, and Detroit's only on a 1-game losing skid in a game which they shouldn't have lost. Um, I think the Bears are overrated. Honestly, obviously Green Bay is going to win that division. They've been the best team in that division for years. Um, I think the Bears are overrated. I think Nick Foles had one good year in Philly, had the Philly special, obviously, and that was it. I don't think the Bears, if they do make it, obviously I've been wrong before, as we know on this podcast. Um, I think the Bears don't make the playoffs, and I think they go like four. How many more games are there? We're in eighth. We're in the eighth week.
Yeah, so the Bears at 5-3 have 8 more games.
8 more games. So I think they go like 3-5, or even like 4-4, 3-5, and I think Detroit goes a little bit better than that. Vikings are garbage. I don't know what happened to them. Everyone puts their expectations way too high because they think they're going to do way too good, and they don't. I think that's all I got to say in that division. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think with respect to the Lions, they lost to the Bears by 4 points. They beat
Yep.
the Cardinals by 3 points. They lost to the Saints by 6. They beat the Falcons by 1, of course, on that last
Last
ditch
play.
play.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then they blew out the Jaguars, which you would expect them to do so. And then they got blown out by the Packers and the Colts, which the Packers you expect. The Colts, maybe not so much, but we'll talk about them soon. And they're a decent team as well. But the Lions still have to play the Bears again, and they play the Vikings twice, including today. Then they also get to play the Washington football team, the Carolina Panthers, the Houston Texans.
So these are not impossible games to win.
So there you can argue that there are 5 wins on the schedule. Let
Mm-hmm.
me just count: Minnesota 1, Washington 2, Carolina 3, Houston 4, Chicago 5, and Minnesota 6. You can
And
argue there's 6 wins
yeah,
on the table for the Detroit Lions. The fact of the matter is, do they win those games?
right.
Because they're 3-4 right now. If they win 5 of those 6 games, that's an 8-8 season. And then you have to argue whether that's good enough to get into the playoffs. I don't think it. I mean, there are 3 wildcard teams, but with
Yeah.
how good the NFC West is, maybe there isn't that spot for them. But I think that you can talk about the Bears and the Lions. I think that there's a legitimate playoff spot there for one of those teams,
Yeah.
whoever can get to 9 wins on the year.
Yeah.
And I think I'll
Yeah.
leave it at that. The Packers are going to win the division, and the Vikings are probably going to finish as the bottom team. It'll be interesting to see how the Lions finish the season, and what they determine successful or not. Because obviously Matt Patricia, as their head coach, has been there for a while, and he's been given a lot of patience to sort of grow something there. And it'll be interesting to see whether he's done enough by the time the season expires.
I guess we'll see. Move on
And
to
then
the next.
finally, the NFC South, which, you know what, I'll be the first person to admit it. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have done a lot better than I thought they would do. I thought they'd be a playoff team, but I didn't think they'd be anywhere near as good at 6-2, and I didn't think that they'd be looking better than the Saints. And so the first thing I want to say is that the Saints have not looked good. They're 5-2, but they have not played like a 5-2 team. And I'm actually going back to my preseason predictions. I'm gonna switch here, and I think the Buccaneers are gonna win this division. And I said I thought they'd win 8 or 9 games. I mean, they're 6-2 right now. I think they could be a 10, 11 win team this year, because they're looking that good. And the reason why is because I severely underestimated their defense.
Yep.
And their defense has been very good this year. That secondary is looking very strong, and it'll be interesting to see, how when they rematch with the Saints, what happens. But I mean, I have not been impressed with the Saints. It took them overtime to beat the Chicago Bears, and just in general, they've not looked impressive for me. And then just to wrap up my final thoughts before I switch it over to you, the Panthers at 3-5. The fact the Panthers are 3-5 and haven't had Christian McCaffrey for the majority of the season, I think is a testament to the steps that they're taking in the right direction. Obviously, they're not going to be anywhere near the playoffs this year, but McCaffrey's returning today, and it will probably be a loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. But McCaffrey coming back, they'll be 3-6 after this week losing to the Chiefs. Maybe they can get to 7-9. And 7-9 for the Panthers, where we all thought they'd be absolutely garbage this year. I mean, that's a good growth season for them. So I do have to say the Panthers are taking steps in the right direction. And if you're a team playing the Panthers, you expect to win, but you have to earn it. And I think that's the important thing there. And then the Falcons, I mean, what can you say about them that hasn't already been said? I think the fact that they fired their coach finally shows that they need to make that step. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is the last season as Matt Ryan as the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. I think that they just realized that they went to that one Super Bowl with the core. We don't have to talk about what happened in that Super Bowl because we all know.
Yep.
And I think that the Falcons core as we see them now, so I'm talking Matt Ryan, and I'm talking like Julio Jones, and I mean, I think that you gotta blow it up.
Right. I agree. I believe did I say that at the beginning that the Bucks are going to win that division?
I believe you did.
I believe I did. And now with Antonio Brown coming in today, they have a lethal team. They have a extremely lethal team. Now a
I
lot of
mean, I could
people
I could argue that Antonio Brown will make them worse, but
a lot of
that's all I'm
people
gonna
will
say.
say they're gonna make him worse. Blah blah blah. He did well with the Patriots when Brady was there. It's the Brady connection. Brady wants to play with Brown. My only concern is what is Brown going to put is Brown going to really try and make Chris Evans not the main guy anymore? Like is he going to try and step up and try and be the main guy despite missing basically 2 years of football? Um
Yeah, Antonio Brown's gonna have to be the third option on that team
even
behind
you could
Godwin and Evans.
you could push him to second, like you could push him, but even then, I don't think so. Yeah, I think he's third string. Um, I think he's smartened up. I really do, and I think playing with Brady, this is literally his last chance. Bruce Arians said this is his last chance. If these court cases in January come back that he did what he did, he's done. Um, but as of now, the Bucks look dangerous. Like they look really dangerous. Gronk is playing great. Evans is playing great. Like that secondary you said is playing great. And Tom Brady looks like he hasn't skipped a beat from 20 years ago, from 10 years ago. Yes, they're going to win that division, and I'm going to say they are going to beat the Saints today, and they are going to be a 12-4 record team this year. And I
Yeah,
say that
I can see that. I can
I
see that.
I say that because the Panthers and Falcons are easy wins. Saints will be the only tough one. Maybe they lose 1 or 2 games to them, depending on how Breeze plays. It's good to have Michael Thomas back in the lineup for the Saints today. That game is arguably going to be the best game of the day, the Bucks and the Saints. Um, Panthers and Falcons are just garbage. Panthers obviously not as garbage as the Falcons. Falcons are a waste of a team. Don't want to spend too much time talking on this one, but I think the Bucks are going to take it.
I mean, their only tough games remaining are the Saints, the Chiefs, and the Rams. So unless they slip up somewhere else, so you can
Yeah,
argue that they have at most 3 losses on their schedule, and that would
sure.
put them at a 5-loss team. So I can definitely see 12-4. I see where you're going with that.
Perfect. All right, let's move over to the East. We got the AFC East, where my Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, the New England Patriots, and the disappointing and waste of a team franchise, the 0-8 Jets.
Wait,
What do you,
they're still in the NFL? I
yeah,
thought they got demoted to college.
what? College doesn't want them. XFL?
The AAFL or whatever it was called.
Yeah, I don't know. The Pac 12. Yeah, see, it doesn't exist, and they still the Jets are garbage. They're just god awful. They're tanking for Trevor Lawrence. That's all I got to say. Um, my Bills look really good, although I'm a little concerned with playing teams above 500. When they're not the greatest, and Josh Allen makes some pretty dumb mistakes. Like they beat the Jets, they beat the Dolphins, they beat the Rams, they beat the Raiders, lost badly to the Titans, and almost beat the Chiefs. And then they beat the Jets and the Patriots again in their season. So they haven't beat a team yet over 500, which is a little concerning as a Bills fan, but I think today will be a very good test against the extremely talented Seattle Seahawks. Miami Dolphins, oh my goodness, they're second in the division. These guys were garbage last year. Oh my god, what happened? Well, here's what happened. Tua happened. And Tua and Fitzmagic, that duo has been playing really well. Unfortunately, Fitzmagic, obviously it's Fitzpatrick, but if you're an NFL fan, you don't call him by that. It's Fitzmagic. Um, was kind of done wrong by the Dolphins organization. You know, what do you think of that whole situation benching him for Tua?
Yeah, I disagree with it.
Yeah.
Just because the Dolphins are in a good position.
Hmm.
So if the plan was, let's see where we're at after 6 or 7 games, and then if Tua is healthy and we suck, give him game time. I fully understand wanting to give your rookie quarterback game time, especially, and I'll talk about it actually in a minute, but
Sure.
I think that the fact that when you bench him, you are a 3-3 team. And this is a division where at 3-3, if you start to put some wins together, you could be looking at a playoff spot. Especially considering you're in a weak-ish division, like you should beat the Patriots and the Jets. I'm a little bit surprised that they went with that. The thing that I was going to say before, I just wanted to get that out of the way first, is I think the reason they did it is because Justin Herbert has come in as a rookie with the
Yeah.
Chargers,
Yeah. Yeah.
but and maybe they said, oh well, if Herbert got drafted after and Joe Burrow, which we'll get into, he's played very well as a rookie, and I think maybe they got pressured into, oh, all these rookie quarterbacks are playing, oh, we know we got to get our rookie quarterback out. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter when you play your rookie quarterback. I mean, Patrick Mahomes sat a whole year, and look at how that turned out. So I
Yeah.
think you need to you shouldn't look at what other teams are doing and make that, like, let that influence your decision. I think that you were looking like a potential playoff team with Fitzpatrick at quarterback. You got to stick with him, and I feel bad that Fitzpatrick's just going to ride bench, but at the end of the day, I mean, Tua wasn't spectacular in his debut, but he got the win, and that's really all that matters. So as long as the Dolphins keep winning, the decision isn't going to be criticized. The only way the thing is, the Dolphins better keep up their performance, because if they start losing a lot with Tua at quarterback, they're going to have to answer a lot of questions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Tua's coming in a little prematurely for him. Yeah, like you said, Mahomes had a whole year, MVP, probably back to back if they win the Super Bowl once again. Was he MVP last year?
Yep.
Yeah.
No, he was
No.
MVP. Yes, he
Yeah, he
was.
was
Yes,
MVP
he
last
was.
year. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, no, because they won the Super Bowl last year. He was MVP 2 years ago. Lamar Jackson was MVP last year.
Right. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Um.
The one thing I will say, though, about the Bills, just to build on your point, is the second half of the season is probably going to be the most important, like, out of all the teams to look for. I think the Bills are going to be one of the most interesting teams, because we talked about the Dolphins and how, they could keep winning some games. The Bills, obviously 6-2, that's a very good first half of the season, but they play the Seahawks today. Tough game. They play the Cardinals in Arizona next week. That's a tough game. Then they have their bye week. They come out of the bye. They'll play the Chargers and the 49ers back to back. And as much as those teams are struggling with their record, those aren't easy teams to beat. Like, you're going to have to earn those victories. Then they'll play the Steelers, who are undefeated at the moment. I doubt they'll be undefeated by the time week 14 rolls around, but that's a very tough game.
Right.
Then they're away in Denver, which should be a win, but once again, it's not a guaranteed victory. Then they go to Foxborough to play the Patriots. Once again, the Patriots aren't that great this year, but I mean, the Patriots almost won that game last week in Buffalo. So
Almost.
the almost, but the Bills are going to have to go into Foxborough, get a win there, and then they wrap up the season against the Dolphins. And so that's a very, very tough last 8 games of the season. I could see the Bills, struggling in a lot of those games. So the question is going to be, you're 6-2, you're the favorites for the division, but you have a tough back stretch of the season. If the Bills can put together some wins and finish the season with, 11, 12 wins, then you know what? I'm going to have all the confidence in them. If they stumble into the playoffs at 10-6 with a 4-4 second half of the season, I'm going to continue asking questions about the Bills and, can they get it done against the good teams? But in terms of whether they'll make the playoffs or not, I mean, it's guaranteed. The Dolphins are a maybe, depending on how they perform. I mean, the Patriots, it's not just the fact that they don't have Tom Brady, and I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, Brady's doing so well with the Bucs. Look, Brady's a great quarterback. He's still a pretty good quarterback even at 42, but the Patriots don't have a team. Like, defensively, they're still pretty solid, but Cam Newton has been a failure. Like, that was it was a good risk to take, but it just didn't pay off. He hasn't been good this year, and they're just not the same team they used to be. So this is the thing, like I said before, I at the beginning of the season, I said I don't expect the Patriots to do too great, but I also wouldn't count them out. I wanted to see what they performed, because you never count out Bill Belichick. But I think it's what everyone expected. They just don't have the talent that they used to have, and they'll probably finish as a 5 or 6 win team. And then the Jets 0-16 or 1-15. I don't need to talk about them.
What a waste of a team. Anyways, moving on. We got the AFC West with the Chiefs, Raiders, Broncos, and Chargers. Your thoughts on this division?
Yeah, so no surprises. We all expect the Chiefs are going to win this division. They'll probably win the division, 14-2 or 13-3, somewhere around there. So I don't really want to talk too much about the Chiefs, because we all know they're going to win the division.
Easy.
The thing that The thing that I will say is that the rest of the division is very interesting because the Raiders, Derek Carr has looked really good this year, and the Raiders, I don't know, because they look good sometimes, but then they look bad sometimes, and they're a very hard team to place. And so I still don't know how to feel about the Raiders. But I think at the beginning of the year, I might have said that they might be a surprise playoff team, and it's looking like they might be a surprise playoff team. I still don't know. The Broncos, once again, I think they're a team that's trying to build in the right direction. And I think they're trying to groom their young quarterback.
Hmm.
Obviously, he hasn't been able to play every single game this year for, whatever issues, COVID here, injuries, that, it happens. And I think they're just trying to take steps in the right direction. And I think if you look at the Broncos, I think it's like I said before with an earlier team. When you play the Broncos, you're expecting to win, but you're going to have to earn that win.
Right.
And then the Chargers. Oh boy, what can I say about the Chargers? I mean, they're 2-5, but they should not be 2-5. Like the amount of leads that they've blown, like the poor game management, you can call it bad luck, but it seems like it's just been a trend for years now with the Chargers where they just lose games that they shouldn't lose. They're the Falcons of the AFC. Like Herbert's been fantastic. In fact, I mean, I think a lot of people just assumed that Joe Burrow would win Rookie of the Year, and I think Justin Herbert said, "Oh yeah, like I don't know
Hold my
about that."
beer.
Yeah, exactly. And Herbert's been fantastic this year, and I think it's very unfair for them to be 2-5 with the performance that he's put on. And that's the thing. I just don't trust the Chargers. I expect that they'll always find a way to lose because most of the time they do. And so, like, I should be talking about the Chargers based on the way they've been playing this year as a fringe playoff team. But the fact of the matter is, they've lost 3 games that they should have won. They should be 5-2 or 4-3, and instead they're 2-5. So I don't want to talk about them anymore because their season's over because of that.
I agree. That's unfortunate. They were supposed to be a really good team this year too.
Yeah, and I mean, you can talk about, oh, they're taking steps, but I'm not seeing those steps because if they were taking steps, they would have won those winnable games.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on the Las Vegas Raiders. Do you think that they can, get into the playoffs?
The only positive thing that'll ever happen to the COVID ravers is that exactly is they're overrated and they're playing way over their heads. I think the Broncos still have a better chance of making it to the playoffs than the Raiders do. Uh,
Wow, that's a
yeah,
that's a bold take right
it is
there.
a
That's a
bold
bold
take.
take.
But here's the thing: is they have a 3-1 away record, but their record at home is 1-2. Both of these teams like have a better away record than a home record. So if Denver can figure it out once they really start getting snow in Denver and you have a team like the Chargers come into town, the Broncos are going to succeed. That's a win right there. They have the teams like the Dolphins coming to town. I don't know if they play them, but I think they play them maybe once. Maybe? I don't know. But you have a warm team that comes into an ice cold hockey rink, then um then I think they have the advantage. And I think if what's his name? What's the quarterback? Drew Lock?
Yeah, Drew
Yeah.
Lock.
If he can figure it out and start making some good passes, making some smarter decisions, then they'll be able to figure it out.
The one thing I will say about the Raiders, though, is you do have to remember they have a win against the Saints on their record. They have a win against the Browns on their record,
Okay.
and they have a win against the Chiefs on their record in
Sure.
Arrowhead. And so I think that that's the thing is when I look at the Raiders, I look at those wins, but then I also see a 25-point loss to the Buccaneers
Yeah.
and a 16-point loss to the Patriots. So I still don't know. Like the Raiders are kind of like that Dolphins team, I guess, but like very different in terms of like storyline and everything, but in terms of record, where you're 4-3 and you start to think if this team figures it out, they can make the playoffs. And I mean, it
but
sounds like you don't think they will.
I don't think they will. I don't think they can figure out. They're inconsistent. When they lose really big. When they win close. Like 10 points only against the Saints, 4 points only against the Panthers. Um Only a touchdown and an extra point against the Chiefs. Like these are close games. 10 points against the Browns. Like if you're going to win, make it convincing. They haven't convinced me that they can win. Like
That's fair.
and
That's fair.
consistently win.
The one thing I will say, though, is
Yeah.
that Derek Carr has done enough, I think, to keep his job, because a lot of people came into the season not knowing what Derek Carr would do. And I think he's been fantastic this year. He'll keep his job there. And that's the last thing I want to say about that division.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on.
Yeah, so we'll have the AFC South. And this is just a tale of two different stories. On the good side, you have the Titans and the Colts, who are both 5-2 and who will both be fighting for the division title probably up until the very end of the season. And then on the other hand, you have the Texans and the Jaguars, who are both 1-6 and who will be fighting for draft position up all the way until the end of the season. So your thoughts on the Titans and the Colts and who you think is going to win the division, and then your thoughts on the Texans and the Jaguars and what went wrong.
The Colts are a dark horse team. I have not been watching them at all this season, and I'm looking, and they're 5-2. Like, where did they get these 5 wins? They beat Vikings, Jets, Bears, Bengals, and Lions. So they've kind of got a little bit of an easy. Like their next 3 games: Ravens, Packers, Titans, and then they played at 4 games, Titans again. And then they play the Steelers one of their last games. I don't know if the Colts are real. I think they've just gotten really, really lucky with the easy schedule they have so far. Derrick Henry's a monster. I think the Titans will win that division, and the Texans just the Texans are the Texans. You know, Deshaun Watson has not been what he has been after losing Hopkins, especially. Um, it's just I don't know what to say about this division because the Texans and Jaguars are like the Jaguars were supposed to be bad. We knew that. Minshew is just playing like garbage, but we knew that. He's not developed enough. I don't know what's going on with Watson. I really don't. And then you got the other two that are fighting for the lead, which will be probably the Titans.
I think it's going to be very interesting. I think what you mentioned with the Colts is very true. I mean, it looks like their defense is elite. It looks like Phillip Rivers is doing enough to sort of glue that offense together. But then, as you said, they haven't really faced anybody. And so it'll be very interesting because, as you mentioned, the second half of their schedule is a lot more difficult than the first half of their schedule to see if they can keep finding these victories. It'll be interesting to see. Meanwhile, the Titans, they started 5-0. Now they're 5-2. But I think that people shouldn't necessarily freak out because I don't think anyone thought that the Titans would be 5-0 and would be one of the best teams in the league. Right. I mean, when we talked about the Titans, we said, okay, this is a team that should be able to lock up the division and should probably win, about 10 games to do it. I don't think the Colts will be able to get to 10 or 11 wins.
Right.
They can prove me wrong and get there, and they certainly have the opportunity to get there. It just comes down to, do you trust them to get there? And I think that the Titans, all they need to do is get to 10 or 11 wins, which is, I think, what everyone sort of expected them to be around at the end of the season, and I don't think the Colts are going to get there. So I do agree with you. I have the Titans. The question for me is, can the Colts sneak into the playoffs? I don't know if they can, particularly because we're going to transition in the AFC North, and that's a stacked division right now. But just before we get ahead of ourselves, the Jaguars, like you said, no one expected them to be good. They traded away all their talent. Minshew, to me, feels more like a one-year wonder than he feels like a properly young quarterback to build around. And in fact, the Jaguars are starting the backup quarterback today.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, Minshew is not playing today. I can't remember. I think he might be injured. That's why. But and the Jaguars are playing, I'm pretty sure, the Texans today.
Yeah, I think it's the Texans too.
And they're playing their backup quarterback because I think the Jaguars are going full tank again. The Texans are a team where I think a lot of people still think they have talent, and obviously Watson's a great quarterback. Like you say, hasn't really played as well this year, but still a great quarterback. I think this is a team, not to always use hockey comparisons, but that's sort of in Minnesota Wild territory where, the team isn't fully committing to a rebuild, and it feels like they should, but and I feel like firing Bill O'Brien is the right call, but they need to go full rebuild for a couple of years, as much as they might not want to do that, especially with Deshaun Watson. But I mean, right now you're looking at a team that's looking like they're going to win, even if they go on a tear, 4 or 5 games. And the last thing you want as a fan of a team is a team that's never in the hunt for the playoffs, but also never in the hunt for the number 1 overall pick. And I feel like that's what the Texans are going to be this year. I think they're going to pick around, 7th or 8th. And you can still find a fantastic player at 7 or 8. But I just hope that if you're a Texans fan, that you don't, stay in that middle obscurity for a while.
Right. Okay, let's move on to the last division, which is the AFC North, which is surprisingly a really good division. We have the Bengals 2-5-1, Browns 5-3, Ravens 5-2, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are the only remaining undefeated team in the NFL. What are your thoughts on this?
That Steelers defense is unbelievable. I think that other than maybe the Ravens, best defense in the NFL. And
I'd say they are the best.
Yeah, I think that Roethlisberger has shown enough that he can still get the job done. Shout out to Canadian Chase Claypool, who's been tearing it up for them at wide receiver.
Making Canada look good.
Mapletron, and I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking like a legitimate team. Now, it's early. It's still early, but I like what I've seen, particularly their ability to win against tough teams, particularly their win against the Ravens. But the big thing is they need to continue to do that, and eventually they'll need to do that in the playoffs. But we're talking about the regular season right now. I still think the Ravens are alive in the division. It's a must-win when they play the Steelers again, which I believe they meet on American Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, I believe so.
That'll be a huge must-win game for the Ravens. But the Steelers hold all the cards right now, and I mean, they're 7-0. They beat the Ravens. They're looking really strong. I have to give the Steelers the division based on how everything's going. But with that being said, the Ravens, they'll be in the playoffs. If they don't win the division, they'll be a wild card team. The one thing I will say, though, is the Ravens are a team that's really looking at Super Bowl or bust every year now. And they were disappointed in the playoffs last year, and it's going to be very tough for them to do anything in the playoffs if they're going to be a wild card team and going on the road all the time. That's the one thing I will say. And so for the Ravens, they really need to push. They need to beat the Steelers, and then they need to keep winning games. They can't lose much more, because even if they lose one more game and get to 3 losses, then the Steelers are then going to have to lose 3 games out of their remaining 9. And so it's very tough for them to get back, but they'll be a playoff team. But for them, I don't think that's good enough, because they didn't want to be a wild card team. And then
no one was expecting them to be a wild card team.
No, but I think that speaks to how good this division is. I mean, the Steelers are that good this year. The Browns.
Listen,
oh boy.
Okay, listen. As a Browns fan watching this season, I have been happy. I've been sad. I've wanted to throw a remote through the TV and then take it back and buy a new TV. It's ridiculous.
I'll say this: Kevin Stefanski is a legitimate head coach.
Yes. So much better than Freddie Kitchens. So much better than Freddie Kitchens.
Baker Mayfield is not a legitimate quarterback.
Yeah.
He's not. And you're going to have to deal with that. When the Browns have had success this year, they've had it through the running game.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt Nick Chubb is injured, but Kareem Hunt is a beast.
Yeah, Chubb and Hunt have been the reason for their wins, and their defense has done enough. Their defense has disappointed me. They're supposed to have a pretty good defense. I haven't seen it. Maybe outside of the performance of Myles Garrett, who is going to be a beast every year, I haven't seen their defense do anything exceptional this year.
Yeah,
and
I
then
agree.
Baker Mayfield is he's an average quarterback who's mistake prone. And I think that's like the Browns have won games when they've ran the ball 40-45 times, not when they've thrown the ball 40-45 times. And so as much as they're 5-3, I I just don't trust them. And I know there's 3 wild card spots this year, but I honestly would pick the Ravens ahead of them, obviously. And then I'd even pick the Colts and the Raiders right now ahead of the Browns. I think the Browns are still very much alive in the wild card race, but I think they're trending downwards, and I wouldn't be surprised if they finished at 9-7 and missed the playoffs on tiebreakers.
I'd take a winning record. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but I'll take a winning record for the Browns.
And then the
I'll
one
take
thing I
that
will
any
say,
day.
the thing I'll say about the Bengals is, I mean, they were, people forget how bad they were last year, and it's not just Joe Burrow. The team as a whole has taken a lot of good steps forward, but I mean, there are times where you see Joe Burrow still having to do everything by himself, and obviously he can't at the NFL the same way he was able to do at LSU. But Joe Burrow, is the real deal. And I think a lot of people weren't sure, including myself, because, he really only had the 1 year at LSU, and a lot of people were saying, okay, well, he had one good,
Well, yeah, one good
as
year.
insane, like literally the best possible year you could have in college football. So it was an insane year, but it's still only 1 year sample size, and that can be a little bit concerning for fans and for scouts and for anybody who wants to read, how good this guy is. But looking at his first 8 games of his NFL career, I mean, I think he's the real deal, and I think the Bengals are trending in the right direction. It just sucks that they're in one of the toughest divisions in football. So I still don't see a path where they can have success in the future because Lamar Jackson's not going anywhere and that Steelers defense isn't going anywhere. But
Yeah,
still, I mean, Joe Burrow's the real deal, and the Bengals are trending upwards.
I agree. Okay, that wraps up our football predictions. Who's winning the Super Bowl? You just gonna stick with who you said? I think you said the Seahawks. No.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with this. I'm gonna stick with the Seahawks. I'm
I'm.
pretty sure I said the Seahawks and the Chiefs
Yep.
in the Super Bowl, and at this point, I'm sticking good with that prediction. I like that prediction.
It's very, very possible. I still think Mahomes is a little bit better than Wilson right now, and I think Mahomes is playing out of his mind as he always does. I still have KC winning the Super Bowl, going back to back.
Yeah, before we wrap up with some hockey talk, I want to get into some brief college football talk as well,
Sure.
because that season has been ramping up, and I know that you're not the most knowledgeable about it, but you did watch Clemson Notre Dame last night, and so I will just give you the floor to talk about that game.
Well, that game, first off, double overtime. Absolutely ridiculous game to watch. No Trevor Lawrence, though. Still kind of out with COVID. Um, he doesn't have COVID, but he had to get some tests done, so he won't be back for another week or so. An absolutely outstanding game to watch until the very end of the game. The Fighting Irish beat the Clemson Tigers 47-40. Game's over, and then what I think it was the play-by-play guy said, pandemonia in a pandemic. All the fans, like they used to before COVID was even a thing, would run onto the field and celebrate when they beat an extremely good team for the very first time. We live in 2020 where COVID-19 is a disease, it's a virus, it's a pandemic, and it is currently happening as we speak. Why in the world are you running onto the field, hugging everyone, extremely close proximity, no masks or very few masks, and you expect nothing to happen? And then the king, LeBron, quotes, "So it's okay for fans to run onto a field after a game, but not okay to have fans in the stadium separated distantly apart." I'm totally with LeBron here. I don't know what the hell they were doing running onto the field like that. I don't know what they thought or when they thought that was an acceptable decision in 2020, running onto a field post game side by side someone else who maybe is not wearing a mask. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that that was not the smartest decision by the fans to be doing. And obviously, the pandemic is still going on. and it's one thing to have fans in the crowd. It's another thing to storm the field like that. And I mean, we've seen college athletes, like Trevor Lawrence, test positive and have to miss games. You're talking about, and I'll get into sort of, my picks for the top bets to make the playoffs right now. But, you're looking at Clemson and Notre Dame are two teams where they both want to, have a serious shot at the national championship. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of those team members are going to test positive for COVID in the coming days because of the crowd that we saw on the field. And so we might have actually seen the fans, by storming the field, really hurt the team's chances at a potential championship bid, because we saw, like, everyone expected Clemson to just run through everybody, and what happens? You miss your quarterback. And once again, I don't want to put this all on Lawrence was out, because obviously Clemson's are also missing some defensive players as well, and they still almost won.
Yeah, and they won almost with the backup in 2 overtimes. Like, that's a great game. That was a great game to watch.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
It's just irresponsible. It's just completely wrong to do what they did.
Yep, absolutely. And so the last thing I'm going to do just briefly here to talking about college football is, obviously we have the 4 spots for the college football playoff. And as we're getting sort of into the heavier part of the season, I just want to talk about sort of 10 teams that I have on my radar to look out for with respect to who's going to get those playoff spots. And so the first 2 teams I'm going to talk about are Clemson and Notre Dame. Obviously, one of the big criticisms of Clemson has been that they haven't faced good competition in their conference. Obviously, they had won 36 straight games in the regular season before this loss. And now losing to Notre Dame, of course, a school that's normally an independent. They joined the conference this year because of COVID. And what are we seeing? Notre Dame in this conference, 7-0, including a win against Clemson. Now, the thing is, because Trevor Lawrence didn't play, because Clemson's missing players on defense, there's going to be a lot of questions that, this win doesn't necessarily count. These 2 teams are going to meet again in the championship game, in the conference championship game. And it's going to be very interesting, because that's now a must-win game for Clemson, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens there. But if Notre Dame beats Clemson in the conference championship, goes undefeated throughout the year, they have to be in the playoffs, and it'll probably be at the expense of Clemson. So Clemson now are in a situation where they cannot lose another game for the rest of this year. So that'll be very interesting to see what happens in the ACC. Of course, then you have the SEC and Alabama, undefeated as usual. And once again, I think that is a playoff spot for Alabama, so long as they win that conference. But I will say, it'll be very interesting to see. Georgia has been very disappointing this year. They already have 2 losses. So at 2 losses, you're not going to get in. But you have Texas A&M at 5-1 and Florida at 4-1. If either of those schools can beat Alabama, win the SEC with a 1 loss on their record, then they probably have a spot into the playoffs. You have to think Alabama right now, even if they were to pick up a loss, would probably be favorites to get a playoff spot as well. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with the SEC. And then, of course, you have Ohio State in the Big Ten. And it looks like the biggest threat to Ohio State is going to be Indiana and Wisconsin. But obviously with the Big Ten starting later, because they didn't agree to return to play until a bit later, it's still very early. Ohio State and Indiana are both 3-0 as opposed to some of these other teams who are 6-7-0. And Wisconsin's only played 1 game because of COVID. So we're still a whiles away from knowing what's going to happen in the Big Ten. But I'd imagine the Big Ten champion would get that playoff spot. So you're looking at a playoff spot probably for the Big Ten champion, SEC champion, and then ACC champion. The big question is who that 4th spot is going to go to. The Big 12 looked like they had a chance, but everyone is just losing to each other. Iowa State has 2 losses. Oklahoma State has a loss. Oklahoma have 2 losses. And so it doesn't look like that playoff spot's going to come from there. So now you start to look at, do you give... and once again, the Pac-12 is still very early. They've just played the first games this week. So unless one of those teams can go perfect, though, looking at probably Oregon as the most likely, it'll be very interesting to see if the committee will give a playoff spot to a non-Power 5 conference team, because there are definitely some teams out there. And the big two that I want to talk about are BYU, who are 8-0 as an independent school, looking very good. And the most interesting team, in my opinion, is Cincinnati. So they're in the American Athletic Conference, not the strongest conference, but they are 6-0, and they are absolutely obliterating teams. They are 236 points for, 70 points against.
Whoa.
Undefeated, absolutely steamrolling everyone. And so if they go undefeated and win their conference as an undefeated team, it'll be very interesting to see what the committee does. Do they pick them over a one-loss Clemson? But what happens if Clemson loses to Notre Dame again? Do you pick an undefeated Cincinnati over a 2-loss Clemson? Over a potential 2-loss Florida? Over a 2-loss Wisconsin, if it gets there. And so things are very, very balanced very, very well in college football as usual, because if Cincinnati are ranked number 6 right now in the country, and I don't know what's going to happen to Clemson with their loss. Obviously, they're ranked number 1. They're going to go down. I'd imagine Notre Dame might actually take over. Actually, I'd imagine Alabama takes over as number 1. Notre Dame probably goes to number 2. Ohio State probably stays at 3. Do you move Cincinnati up because they're still undefeated? So college football, it's going to be very interesting. Those are the main teams that I would keep an eye on moving forward. But it'll be very, very, very interesting. And I'm honestly, I like a good underdog story. I'm hoping Cincinnati can win. And the last thing I'll say about that is, obviously UCF are in the same division. This is a UCF team that went undefeated one year and claimed a national championship, even though they didn't get invited to the national championship game. And I think one of the main reasons why they switched to this playoff format and brought 4 teams in is because they wanted to give more teams an opportunity to play for a championship. And that's why they went from, just 2 teams playing in the national championship to this sort of 4-team semifinal format. Yeah. And UCF fans from a couple of years ago wanted to say, hey, give us a chance to beat these big schools. And they actually beat Auburn in a bowl game with that team. And so it'll be very interesting a couple of years later to see what happens with Cincinnati, a team in their conference, because if they go undefeated and don't get invited to the playoff, there's going to be a lot of disappointed Cincinnati fans, and there's going to be a lot of college football fans who are saying, what does it take for a school outside of these big conferences to win a national championship? Because right now it looks like you just have to be in the SEC or in the Big Ten or in one of these big conferences. Because if Cincinnati goes undefeated and don't get invited, it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens there. But that's college football talk. That's what I wanted to mention. And keep an eye out for some of those teams.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely going to be a good year for college football.
It always is a good year. That's the thing when you have so many good teams and only 4 playoff spots. Yeah, so the last thing we want to do today before we wrap up is... obviously, we have Jacob, huge Leafs fan, and since we've last spoken, the Leafs have made a couple of free agent signings and some re-signings as well. And so we're going to just do a nice little report card. So I will name the signing and the term, and I'll give Jacob a chance to grade the signing and talk a little bit about it. And so we're going to do the signings after free agency. So if you want to hear our opinion on Jason Spezza, TJ Brody, and Wayne Simmons, check out our last podcast. We talked about it there.
Yep.
So we are going to start with Zach Bogosian on a 1-year, $1 million contract.
I like it. I think I'd give it a B plus. I think he's a good defenseman. He played he was pretty bad on Buffalo, but that's because it's Buffalo. Goes to Tampa Bay, wins a Stanley Cup. He's a right-handed shooter, which is exactly who we need on the Leafs. So that is why he gets a B plus. It's a 1 year, $1 million. I think it's a very, very nice, light team, easy deal.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Just a nice, easy deal, but something that will help the team. Next up, we have Travis Boyd, 1 year, $700,000, and I feel like it's easy to just group this as well with Jimmy Vesey, 1 year, $900,000.
Mm-hmm. So these are good. I'm gonna put them both at a. I think I'm gonna go with a B on this one. I think Travis Boyd and Jimmy Vesey are both decent hockey players. Boyd spent most of his season last year with the AHL, and Jimmy Vesey was with the Rangers last year, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Oh no, he's with Buffalo last year.
He
No,
was with Buffalo. Yeah, he went
Buffalo.
from the Rangers to the Sabres.
Man, with the Buffalo Leafs or something like that. Oh my goodness. Um, yeah, they're very easy deals. They're good, rotation guys if you ever need. I think Boyd will spend more time with the Marlies than VC. I think VC has proven himself a little bit more, and it's about the same contracts, and it's not bad. 1 year, very small deals. I think it's okay for the Leafs to do that.
Yeah, once again, couldn't agree more. Just some nice depth piece signings.
Yeah.
Then we have a couple of goalie signings, which I'll group together as well.
Okay.
We have Aaron Dell, 1 year, $800,000, and we have the return of Michael Hutchinson, two-year deal, $1.5 million. So that's $725,000 a year.
These are both A deals. I give them A deals because not only I think a lot of people will question Hutchinson coming back, but here's the reason why Dubas did it. One, his contract is 2 years, 700 and I think it was 25,000 a year or something like that. I can't remember. Doesn't matter.
Yep, 725.
725. Okay, so that contract will be burned and buried in the AHL. He'll never see that contract only applies if he is in the NHL, if he plays a game in the NHL, which he will not, because Aaron Dell, our third string goaltender, will be the call up before him. Aaron Dell had a decent year last year. I think it was a 0.919 save percentage, I believe. I am wrong before. And he's a good guy you can rely on. I think these will be our two AHL goaltenders. I think Ian Scott and Joseph Woll will definitely be able to develop properly under guys like this. And Michael Hutchinson is now that we have Hutchinson, he is now eligible for the Seattle draft, meaning we don't have to worry about Freddie because he's on the last year of his contract, and no one's going to take that. No one's going to pick up Jack Campbell because they don't need a backup. And then Aaron Dell will be cleared by waivers, or if he clears waivers, then he'll go down to the AHL, won't be able to be taken there, and then it leaves Hutchinson open for the draft. Kyle Dubas was very smart on this. A lot of people were very concerned at the beginning, as was I, because I'm like, oh, great, Hutchinson, great. There's Freddie, there's Campbell, there's Dell, and then there's Hutchinson, who will not see a game in the NHL for the Toronto Maple Leafs unless Freddie, Campbell, and Dell are extremely hurt or injured or sick. So A to Dubas on this one. This was a very good pair of deals for the Maple Leafs.
Awesome. Just a couple more free agent signings, and then we'll talk about the two re-signs that happened. We have Joey Anderson, a 3-year deal, $750,000 per year, and then big Jumbo Joe Thornton coming to Toronto.
Jumbo Joe is a Leaf, baby.
1 year, $700,000 contract. Your thoughts on both of those?
So Joey Anderson was picked up in a trade, which sent Andreas Johnsson to the Devils. Johnsson was great. But we needed that cap space. We really did. It was really, really, really needed. I like this. Joey Anderson has been compared to some of the best players in the NHL. He's going to be an excellent penalty kill. He'll be probably on the fourth line, rotating in and out between the AHL and the NHL. It is a two-way contract. He's a good penalty killer, and if he's able to develop properly, which I think he can, he'll be one of the best penalty killers maybe Maple Leafs have had in a while. So I think that's a great deal. Jumbo Joe. Oh man, when the news broke, I was ecstatic. I love this contract. And now a lot of people will not like this for a Leaf because he's old. He's 41 years old? No, yeah, he's up there. He's old. I don't know exactly his age, but he's old.
You were right. He's
41. So he's a 41-year-old hockey player, most famously known for his beard. But what people don't understand is he brings an extreme amount of experience to this team for such a young core. Like we talked about it with Spezza, we talked about it with even bringing in Wayne Simmons. Like they bring the experience for this team, and Joe Thornton has years and years, like a decade at least of experience. He'll be a third liner, maybe even a fourth liner, depending on how he's playing. But it doesn't matter at the end of the day because Jumbo Joe believes in the Leafs, and he thinks that this is a year that they have a chance to win. And honestly, as a Leaf fan, you should be excited for this signing because it's a team friendly signing. It's a 1-year deal. It could be his last year, so he retires a Leaf. um, which would be great because he's from the Ontario, and he's still producing. Like if he's able to produce on a god awful Sharks team, what can he do on a god great Leafs team? Like I'm excited to see him play, and I can't wait to buy his jersey the first day it comes out.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about Thornton
Sure.
is, and Spezza as well, and I guess Wayne Simmons a bit, but obviously if you listen to the last podcast, you know I disagree with the Wayne Simmons signing just because I think his style of play
Yeah,
doesn't fit
yeah,
in with the NHL. But just in general, Thornton, Simmons, and Spezza are all veteran guys. They're all on one-year deals, and they're all being paid a combined total of $2.9 million.
right. Like
So and we talk about the big problem with the Leafs is all of their top guys are making so much money that it's hard to build a team around them. And so this is a perfect bottom six pickup because Thornton, Simmons, and Spezza, at the very least are going to be responsible defensively, and then production is additional. And you can judge them on their production, but these are good contracts to fill bottom six positions, and
yeah.
particularly Thornton and Spezza I really like with the veteran presence and everything like that. The last two signings to talk about are the two re-signings that they were able to do, and you talked about having to get rid of Johnson. They got rid of Kapanen to free up cap space. Well, where did that cap space go? Well, Ilya Mikheyev, the suit man, is back on a 2-year deal on $1.6 million per. Your thoughts on that?
I think this is good because they were able to avoid arbitration, and I think arbitration is really bad for a team's morale, especially for a team who's trying to develop and have a good relationship with other players. They were able to come to a contract, a deal, kind of in the middle between what the two are asking. I think a 2-year deal is good. He's going to play to pay, so if he is able to develop or not develop, if he's able to play like he's expected to play before he went out with that injury, which he was. Um, then he'll definitely get paid his next paycheck. I think this is great. I think I wanna give this maybe an A minus. I want to give the Thornton and the other ones an A minus as well. I'm gonna give this an A minus. I think Mikheyev definitely has incredible speed, even though he doesn't. He's really lanky, and but if you watched him last year, man, like he's got a lot of speed. So I really like this one. I really do, and I think. I think I'll give after the end of this. I'll give my overall thoughts about the free agency for the Leafs, but I think good job by Dubas on this one.
Yeah, and the last signing to talk about is Travis Dermott. He re-signs on a 1-year
Hmm.
deal worth $875,000. Your thoughts on this deal, and also your thoughts on the fact that he signed a 1-year deal at a low cap hit, and are you worried about your ability to keep Travis Dermott long term?
Yeah, that was my whole issue with this. I'm gonna give it a B minus because when this deal came out, I'm like, okay, wow, 874,000, that's great. Then I looked at how many years, and it's a 1-year deal. And there's a lot of 1-year deals we have this year, and I don't think we can afford to lose this guy. Um, I thought he played pretty well last year. I thought he was a pretty reliable defenseman we could always lean back on. Um, I really don't like how it's 1 year because if he doesn't play, like people have bad years, or if he gets injured and he misses half the year, well, we got to figure out what to do next. And I'm concerned that if something happens to him, it's over and he's going to leave, and I think we're going to lose a very, very, very good asset and a very good defenseman to our team. So I mean, I like the deal. It's okay. It's good for what it is because, like you said, our top four make up about 90% of our cap. um so Dubas did what he had to do, and it is what it is. It's 1 year, which sucks, but it's a good deal. It's a good money price, so I mean, it's not bad.
And overall, what grade would you give the offseason moves of the Leafs so far?
I'm giving a Dubas an A plus plus. What he's been able to do. So basically, signing the top four to an extreme amount of money like that was probably a mistake, and I think Dubas realized that, and I think Dubas had to make right. Dubas, Kyle Dubas, is arguably the best GM in the league right now. Joe Sakic is up there. Um, I think it's Steve Yzerman of the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think
Yzerman left. He's
he
been
went to
replaced by
Detroit.
Julian Brisebois.
Julian Breesman, yeah, so he's pretty good too. Um, Kyle Dubas really made a big mistake signing those four to that much. Maybe Matthews was worth it. Tavares, maybe not so much. Nylander, definitely not. And Marner, no. He made up for it big time, signing all these guys. I think Wayne Simmons or Mikheyev was the most expensive for like $2 million for the 2 years.
Yeah, the most
Brody.
expensive
Well, technically
most
Brody.
expensive was TJ Brody, but
Brody.
outside of TJ Brody, Ilya Mikheyev at 1.6 million is the next most expensive player you've signed.
Like TJ Brody, but he was here for 4 years. Like that, which is an incredible deal. I mean, that like for a guy like him, I would say that's a steal. He could definitely have gone to another team for more money. Um, what Kyle Dubas was able to make up for, what he messed up on, he made up for. He signed all these guys on very, very minimum contracts. He signed them to more than 1 year for most of them. He signed veteran guys who are going to bring a lot of oomph to the team, a lot of positivity power, like Thornton, re-signing Spezza, who should be getting paid more, but isn't because he wants to win, because that's a team player, and I love Spezza. He's arguably one of the best players on the Leafs in the terms of morale wise and as a team player. Um, Kyle Dubas is an absolute god. Like for what he's done, like Malgin, they hired Paul McLean, Manny Malhotra, like, and they got rid of all that cap space. Like Dubas knows what he was doing, and I think Dubas is going to be the best GM in the league. If the Leafs win this year, it's because of that man. It is because of Kyle Dubas and what he was able to do this offseason with the amount of space. Imagine having your hands tied by 4 people, getting out of it, signing like 6 or 7 more, and then having an actual team this year. Like it's outstanding to what he did. Like look at our decor. We got Riley Brody on the first line, and then you have Muzzin, and I don't know. You could put Bogosian, you could put Hall, you could put Dermott, and then you have on the third one. You could have Bogosian, you could have Hall, you could have Dermott. Like we have a good team this year. My only issue with it's not with Dubas, but I think with the Leafs is can they play to what their contract is? That's my only concern. We got rid of CC, got rid of Barry. It's kind of like a fresh start for the Leafs. Forget about last year. Forget
Yeah,
about CC being a pylon. Forget about Barry being a pylon. Forget about all these guys. Just this is a new year. You know what? And as a Leaf fan, I've been saying that for 21 years now. Obviously, I haven't been saying it for 21, but it's been like that for 21 years. This is the year. This year especially is the year they have to get it done. Because if they do not get it done, they're going to lose a bunch of guys, and then they're going to be stuck with a bunch of AHL guys who aren't going to be like those guys. Dubas,
yeah. The
you're a
thing I'll
god.
say about Dubas is I do agree with you in the sense of what he's been able to do with the fact that his hands are tied. The one thing I will say though is you also have to keep in mind that he's the one who's tied his own hands, and so
I understand. Yeah, yeah.
that definitely it does play a factor.
But
And this is the thing with the Leafs now. It's every year you're going to have a lot of turnover because the majority of the depth of your team is going to have to be long or short-term low value contracts to
yeah.
build around the core that you have. And so it's very interesting, like you said, because every year this team could be looking very different, and it'll be very interesting to see what this team is able to do this year. And so I agree with you. I do like the moves, but I mean, I think everything has to go back to the fact that that top four is, or those 4 guys getting paid, does really handcuff you guys a
it
lot.
does.
But
But here's
it
the
is a
thing.
promising time for
Here's
sure.
the thing with Dubas though is it's hard to get yourself out of that situation. And sure, it's a lot of 1 year. Sure, it's a lot of low contracts. But they didn't get a lot of low contracts AHL guys. They got Bogosian who came off a Stanley Cup. They have Boyd who's decent in the AHL. Reassigned Brody or signed Brody to a nice deal. Wayne Simmons is coming off a questionable year in Buffalo. It's Buffalo. It's a fresh start. Toronto. He's a I think he's Mississauga or Scarborough. Re-sign Jason Spezza. They re-sign Dennis Mulligan. They bring in these veteran assistant coaches. Yes, Dubas tied his hands. He's untying them at the same time. Yeah, he's like, oh God, I've put myself in a bad situation. And he's not complaining. He's not down in the dumps. He's not like, oh my God, what are we going to do? He's like, okay, I put myself in a bad situation. I'm going to get myself out of it in a way of, I'm going to give Leaf fans what we need with what we have. And he's given us what we need with what we have. We have Joe Thornton. We have some veterans. We have Ilya Mikheyev back again. We have some speed. We have Travis Dermott. We have our defensemen. We have TJ Brody. And that Riley and Brody will arguably be one of the most offensively defensive pairs this year. And I'm very excited to watch it. So, yes, Dubas has made some mistakes. 4 big mistakes, you can argue. Matthews, you can argue, is worth it. Um, but what makes a good GM, what separates a good one from a bad one, is what can you do with what you have left. And Dubas has made the absolute best with what we have. So that is why he gets the marking he does, because what he has done with what we have, a lot of GMs could not do it.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It'll be interesting to see what happens this year, but definitely the Leafs have found themselves in a pretty solid position. It's just going to be up to the on-ice performance, as you mentioned. And so with that, we thank you again for listening. Like we said before, we're going to be working on a more regular schedule to get these things out more regularly for you guys. But in the meantime, on behalf of Jacob, I want to say thank you for listening. And we will see you next time on the Benchwarmers Sports Talk podcast. But until then, take care, everyone, and goodbye.